The 2017 legislative session and the Mississippi Senate convenes. The Senate will come to order. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Barnett, Blackman, and Blackwell, Blunt, Branning, Browning, Bryan, Burton, Butler, Carmichael, Kaufman, Chazanall, Clark, Dawkins, Deering, DeBar, Doty, Fillingham, Frazier, Galat, Harkins, Hill, Hobson, Horn, Hudson, Jackson of the 15th, Jackson of the 11th, Jackson of the 32nd, Jolly, Jordan, Kirby, Massey, McDaniel, McMahon, Michelle, Moran, Norwood, Parker, Parks, Polk, Seymour, Simmons of the 12th, Simmons of the 13th, Stone, Tyndall, Tollison, Turner, Ford, Watson, Wiggins, Wildman, Witherspoon, Younger. Mr. President, a quorum, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Will the senators and the guests in the gallery please rise for our invocation to be given today by the Reverend George Richard James, the senior pastor at St. Luke's United Methodist Church, a guest today of the Lieutenant Governor, and our pledge immediately following to be led by Senator Walter Michel.
Let us pray. O God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come, our shelter from the stormy blast, and our eternal home. We give you thanks and praise for all the many blessings we have received from your goodness. We lift up to you this day our senators, Lieutenant Governor, and all the leaders of our state. Touch their minds with your wisdom. Touch their hearts with your compassion. Touch their mouths to speak forth your truth. Stir up in them and in all of us a desire to see your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Bless and strengthen these servants, their staffs, and their families, and continue to bless all the people of Mississippi, this place we are privileged to call home. Through your most holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Senators, please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mr. Governor.
Thanks, Senator.
All right,
appreciate you. The first item on our agenda today is the election of the Sergeant at Arms. I will recognize Senator Burton for a nomination. Senator Burton, you recognize.
It gives me a great privilege and honor to nominate Ronnie Lamar Stewart as the Sergeant at Arms of the Mississippi State Senate. Many of you know Ronnie. He's been Sergeant Stewart's been down in the first floor guard shack area right inside the door. He worked with the Capitol Police Department. Prior to that, he was Driver Services Master Sergeant. And prior to that, he was a Highway Patrol officer on the road in Newton County back in 1987 when he first came out of the academy. I knew Ronnie back in 30 years ago. He was well liked by the people in Newton. He was well liked by the people in Jackson. And he is willing and able to be a good Sergeant at Arms and maintain the order and do those other duties that a Sergeant at Arms will be called upon to do. So I bring forward the nomination of Ronnie Lamar Stewart for Sergeant at Arms of the Mississippi State Senate with great honor and privilege.
Thank you, Senator Burton. I'm now going to recognize Senator Butler, who would like to second the nomination. Senator Butler, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, it's an honor for me to come before this Senate today and second the nomination for a very qualified, dignified young man that have given his life in support of the state of Mississippi. I would like to second the nomination for none other than Mr. Ronnie Stewart to serve in the capacity as Sergeant at Arms.
Thank you, Senator Butler. I'll now recognize Senator Burton.
Mr. President, I move the nomination cease and that Ronnie Stewart be elected by acclamation and by a standing ovation, welcoming him to the Mississippi Senate as Sergeant at Arms.
Thank you, Senator Burton. We're going to give the new Sergeant at Arms 2 applauses because we got to vote first. So, Senator Burton moves that the nomination be closed and Ronnie Stewart be elected by acclamation. Is there any objection? Does any senator wish to be recorded as voting no? Seeing none, by the noon roll call, Ronnie Stewart has been elected Sergeant at Arms of the Mississippi State Senate. I'm going to ask Mr. Stewart to please come forward. Come on, let you put your left hand here, and raise your right hand, please. Thank you. And please repeat after me. I, Ronnie Stewart, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Mississippi and obey the laws thereof. That I am not disqualified from holding office of Sergeant at Arms. That I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office upon which I am about to enter. So help me God. Congratulations. Now, our next item of business is messages and petitions. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, there are none.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Next item is introduction of bills and resolutions. Senator Polk, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate dispense with the reading of the titles of bills and resolutions.
Senator Bryan, for what purpose do you see recognition?
Mr. President, I have a bill to introduce, followed by a motion.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to recognize Senator Bryan. Senator Bryan, please bring your resolution forward.
Mr. President, I would introduce this bill and move that the Senate go into a committee of the whole to consider it. assuming that there is a substitute motion.
Okay, Senator Bryan is introducing a bill. I have recognized him to do so. I am going to recognize the clerk to read the title of the bill. Mr. Clerk, please read the title.
Fiscal year 2017 appropriation to MDE, delete prohibition against expenditure of public funds for Mississippi Association of School Superintendents.
Now, the senator has introduced the bill and asked to make a motion to go into the committee of the whole. I'm going to recognize Senator Burton. Senator Burton, for what purpose you see recognition?
Mr. President, for a substitute motion,
Please state your motion.
I move that the bill be referred to the Appropriations Committee.
Mr. President, I'd like to speak on whichever motion has precedent.
Okay. Okay, the substitute motion has precedent. Senator Burton, would you like to speak to your motion, or would you like to allow Senator Bryan to speak to your motion, then you follow?
I'll allow Senator Bryan to speak,
Okay.
and I'll close.
The substitute motion is that we refer the bill to the Appropriations Committee. Senator Bryan, you're recognized to speak.
Mr. President, this body as a body, the Senate as an institution, made a mistake. And we, the Senate, as a body and as an institution, need to correct that mistake. There is a provision in the appropriation bill for public education which provides that none of the funds in the bill may be expended to make payments to the Mississippi Association of School Superintendents. Further, there's a provision that none of the funds in the entire bill, none of the funds for public education in the whole state, may be expended if any local school district spends any public funds to make payments to the Mississippi Association of School Superintendents. That means that if any one school district in the state were to send $1 to the Mississippi Association of School Superintendents, then no money could be spent for public education out of the state treasury in this fiscal year. This provision, I believe, had its genesis in the House. And I know there were a number of people upset with either the Mississippi Association of School Superintendents or with particular school superintendents, and sought to make that distress public. But that was a mistake. It was a mistake to address that frustration in this manner. I'll just say as an aside, if I tried to spend my time evening the scores with all the people that I thought had said unkind things about me, that's all I'd ever do down here. I think all of us that run for public office and serve in public office People say things about us that are unpleasant, but you know, it's a free country. You get to do that. And retaliating against individual superintendents or the Superintendents Association was just the wrong thing to do. Now, this provision has an interesting history. I don't think this Senate as a body ever voted on an appropriation bill with this provision in it during the course of the session. My recollection, which may be faulty, but I think is right, is that this was a House proposition, and it found its way in the conference report, as provisions do. When conference report, by definition, is a compromise between the two chambers. But my recollection is that when this conference report was filed, it was that Sunday afternoon when we had 4 hours to consider every single appropriation bill, a situation that I've never seen before and hope to never see again. And you may remember that debate that Sunday afternoon when members would ask the chairman of appropriations if a particular agency actually had more or less money than the previous year because of the change dealing with special funds, and the chairman said he didn't know. I certainly hope we never have that situation face us again. And it was in that chaos during that 4 hours that this appropriation bill was passed. I believe it to be the case that this provision was not in the printed conference report. But you may remember later in that session, there was a unanimous consent request to make changes in conference reports. That's happened before. There's a sentence that's left out, or numbers are transposed, or there's an irregular or an improper cross-reference. And I think all of us, and we should, try to cooperate with the chair and whoever to correct errors in conference reports and make sure the conference reports all say what they're supposed to say. But you may remember that unanimous consent request went on for about 15 minutes. That unanimous consent request was far beyond anything we've ever done before. It changed major provisions of bills. There were more changes in that one unanimous consent request, I believe, than in ever unanimous consent request in the 200 years of the Mississippi State Legislature. So this provision was not noticed. I think also it's the case that there were printed copies of the unanimous consent request, and I think, although I may be wrong about this, but I believe this provision was not in the printed copies, and I believe that the staff had to go back and listen to the tapes of the proceeding to make sure that there was an oral request to add this provision. It's an unprecedented situation upon an unprecedented situation upon an unprecedented situation. And it's just not right. Now, I want to make clear, I'm certainly not pleased with the current leadership at the Mississippi Association of School Superintendents. And I hope the school districts withdraw from it. And I hope they form an organization of school superintendents who will fight for public education. Believe me, there need to be some changes made at the leadership of the Mississippi Association of School Superintendents, if you ask me. Hercules clearing out the Augean stables had less work than would be required to clean out the leadership at the Mississippi Association of School Superintendents. But that's not something we need to address through legislation, and it's not something we need to address through an appropriation bill. Now, what this bill would simply do is eliminate Section 44 from that conference report. It would repeal Section 44. It's a symbolic act at this point, but it's a symbolic act that we should take. It's an act I believe we should take as a body. We don't need to do again the things that we did in the previous session This was a mistake that all of us made. It was made on the floor. It was a unanimous consent request on the floor. And for that reason, I think it's appropriate at our first opportunity to go into a committee of the whole and correct this error that we all made. For that reason, I would ask you to vote no on the committee to refer the bill to appropriations.
Thank you, Senator Bryan. I'm now going to recognize Senator Burton. And just as a point of clarification, so we're all on the same page, the original motion to go into the committee of the whole would have required a 2/3 vote. The substitute motion, which is to refer the bill to the Appropriations Committee, as it would have otherwise been prepared, is a majority vote. And that's the motion that we're on, is the substitute motion, which is a majority vote. Senator Burton, I'm going to recognize you to speak on your substitute motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Bryan's been here a long time, and I know he is sincere. He is very, very sincere in his actions. He just happens to be wrong on this one. Just because someone has the right to do something doesn't mean doing that something is right. And I think that the opportunity to go into the committee of the whole is certainly an option. But we've had, in his opinion, we made a mistake. Some of you might think we've made other mistakes in the past. In the 25 years I've been here, I've heard a lot of people say we made a mistake doing that. I wish I had that vote back, all kinds of things. But we've never gone into the committee of the whole to fix one. It's a bad precedent. I don't think it's a good idea. Let's go through the regular process. Let the appropriations folks work on it, as they always do. And we can get this thing fixed. If there is a problem to be fixed, we can get it done through the regular process. So I would ask you to vote for my motion to refer the bill to the Appropriations Committee.
Senator Blunt, for what purpose do you see recognition?
Question, Mr. President.
Question of Senator Burton?
Senator Burton.
Senator Burton, do you yield for a question?
I do.
You recognize Senator Blunt.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Burton, you mentioned precedent. Are the facts that Senator Bryan described, namely the fact that this substantive policy decision regarding school districts and funding for the Superintendent's Association, was that change made not in the conference report, but in a request for unanimous consent to correct typographical errors without any written summary provided to the members, and as part of a request for unanimous consent to correct typographical errors, not to make policy changes to conference reports? Are the facts as he described them accurate?
I can't answer that question because, as you know, in the last weeks of the session, we are running around like madmen trying to get it all done. I heard the unanimous consent request on several issues. I don't know which ones there were, which ones there weren't, but I trusted my chairman over here, so I can't answer your question.
Well, I mean,
because I don't know.
Well, and you're right. We're all trying to. There are a lot of balls in the air that last week, and this institution operates on trust. And as long as I've been here, it's always operated on the fact that when a chairman wants to make technical corrections,
The funds appropriated by the legislature. So not to say they can't be a member or pay some dues, just can't do it with state money. I move that we ask you to vote.
Senator Jordan, for what purpose do you see recognition?
I have a question, Mr. President.
Does Senator Burton yield for a question?
I yield, yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Byrd. The question is, why is it being held from MASS, Mississippi Association of School Superintendents? Why?
I was not a part of those negotiations on that bill, so I do not know.
So no, who would know? You?
I think, as Senator Bryan stated, it was a recommendation that came from the House to be included in the conference report.
Okay. So nobody knows. It came from the House.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Being a conferee on the bill, but not actually negotiating the conference report, I can't tell you where it came from.
You can't tell me.
I don't know that. All I know
Okay.
is what Senator Bryan said. I believe.
Yeah,
It was the
and
House.
now, why?
I don't know.
Thank you, sir.
Senator Stone, for what purpose do you see recognition?
For question.
Does the senator yield for a question?
I do indeed.
Senator Burton, my understanding with the explanation that Senator Bryan gave was that if any public funds, state funds or local funds, is expended by any school district to the Mississippi Association of School Superintendents, it basically cuts off the whole appropriation bill for K through 12 education. Is that not that was the way that I understood his explanation?
Maybe that's correct.
So in other words, if that is the case, one school district somewhere could decide to make a payment with local funds to the Mississippi Association of School Superintendents and wipe out the entire appropriation for every school district in the state.
If that's what the bill says, yes.
Okay, thank you.
That's why we need to go to the appropriations process and figure it out.
Any further discussion on the motion? Mr. Chairman, Senator Clark would like to speak on the motion. Senator Clark, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, just looking back at conference report again, I hit with this afresh. Just reading the conference report that you voted on does say that none of the funds provided herein may be expended to make payments or transfers to the Mississippi Association of School Superintendents. So someone has asked me, was it not even in there? It was in there. That's exactly what we voted on right there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Bryan, for what purpose do you see recognition? Okay, I recognize Senator Burton to close on his motion, but Senator Bryan, I'm going to recognize you to speak, but please do so recognizing that you've already spoke once and respecting the time of the Senate. Thank you.
The additional sentence that was added reads as follows. Furthermore, none of the funds provided herein may be expended if any local school district expends any public funds to make payments or transfers to the association. The sentence that was apparently in the original conference report says none of the funds provided herein may be expended to make payments or transfers to the Mississippi Association of School Superintendents. Whatever the merits of putting such a provision in the bill, it had no real-world effect. If that provision, which was the provision that was in the conference report, had remained as it was, it may have been an improper thing to do, but all the local districts would have had to do is make pay their dues out of local funds. It would have had no impact. But what this additional sentence did, what was in the unanimous consent request, what it did was to say none of the funds provided herein may be expended. That's $2 billion or whatever it is. That's how much at stake. None of the $2 billion in this appropriation bill may be expended if any local school district expends any public funds to make payments or transfers to the association. So, as I said originally, the effect of this sentence is to say if any school district sends $1 of public funds to the Mississippi Association of School Superintendents, not a penny of the $2 billion or whatever it is appropriation for public education can be spent. That's just wrong. I don't think that everyone understood that's what we were doing when we had the unanimous consent request. Speaking for myself, I certainly didn't pick that out of the unanimous consent request. And for that reason, I'd ask you to vote no on Senator Burton's motion, and let's dispose of this matter in a committee of the whole right away.
Thanks, Senator Bryan. Senator Burton, you care to close, or would you like to vote? The substitute motion is that we refer the bill filed by Senator Bryan to the Appropriations Committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. No. The ayes have it. The substitute motion passes. Now, Senator Polk, I'm going to recognize you for introduction of bills and resolutions.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate dispense with the reading of the titles of bills and resolutions.
Motion is to dispense with the reading of the titles of the bills and resolutions. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed say no. The ayes have it. At this time, I'm going to ask the clerk to please read the names of the committee to notify the governor that the Senate is organized and ready for business. Mr. Clerk.
Senator Jennifer Branning, Senator Tommy Gallant, Senator Warren Barnett.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. At this time, I'm going to recognize the clerk to name the committee to notify the House that the Senate is organized and ready for business. Mr. Clerk.
Senator Barbara Blackman, Senator Chad McMahon, Senator Briggs Hobson.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Next item on our agenda is introduction of guests by senators. Senator Wiggins, you're recognized for an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have in the gallery over here to my left a very good Jackson Countyan and the new president of the Board of Trustees of the Singing River Hospital System, Mr. Jeffrey Belt. Thank you for being here and thank you for your service. Please give him a welcome.
Welcome to your Mississippi State Senate. Senator Norwood, you're recognized for an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'd like to introduce the real lady of Senate District 12, Ms. Simmons, Kawanda Simmons, and Mr. DJ Derrick Jr., my deskmate's wife and son.
Welcome, Senator Parker. You're recognized for an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to call your attention to the North Gallery, seated right at the edge there. If you would stand up, our new Supreme Court Justice Bobby Chamberlain. I believe his wife and his son are with him too. So if you would, please make him welcome. He's going to be spending a lot of time in Jackson.
Thank you, Senator. Welcome back to the Mississippi State Senate, and congratulations. Senator Moran. Senator Deering, you're recognized for an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, it's my pleasure to introduce the doctor of the day, east of Natchez, Dr. Roderick Gibbons, over here. And we're just so pleased to have Dr. Gibbons here today. And he came here last year, too, Mr. President. Let's give him a good round of applause.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Doctor, for your service here today. Senator Fillingane, you're recognized for an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. President. Over here to the table to my right, we have Senator Chastanal's extended family. Her daughters, both lovely. Mimi and Baden Taylor, her grandson, and Mary Ray and Ayla Kaywood. Please make them welcome.
Welcome to your Mississippi State Senate. Senator Jordan, you're recognized for an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have with us today Mr. Patrick O'Connor, writer, producer, and director from Pasquistan, is here with us in the Northern Gallery. We're going to ask you to make him welcome. And his crew.
Welcome to the Mississippi State Senate. Well, you better hurry up. Next, seeing no further introductions, we are moving to announcements. We'll recognize Senator Burton for an announcement.
I have several announcements, Mr. President, and an adjourn in memory. When the Senate adjourns today, we'd ask that we adjourn in memory of Donald Cleo Shannon, of Lena, who passed away recently. His daughter Heidi is in the gallery this morning, actually, or this afternoon, and we extend our sympathies to Mr. Shannon's family upon his passing and would ask the Senate adjourn in his memory today. Also, we'd like to introduce our pages, our senior pages. We'll bring them out forward. Oh, and that adjourn in memory also, add Senator Horn to that, if you will, please. From Amory, by way of Mississippi State University, and she is now in Jackson working with a degree in political science, is that right, from MSU? And she's worked on some campaigns and is looking forward to being a senior page for us this year. Ashley Johnson from Amory. From Starkville originally, and now from Columbus. The only negative thing about him is his neighbor is Chuck Younger. But he is finishing his final semester at EMCC. We'll move on to Mississippi State University after that. And he is an outstanding young man who comes highly recommended by his professors, so it doesn't get much better than that. Would you welcome from Columbus, Harrison McBride. These two young folks will be glad to help you with anything that you need. They're fast learners, and they have really picked up on what they're supposed to be doing. And for this old rebel to introduce two bulldogs, that's pretty neat. So they're good folks. Also, you're invited to a reception to kick off our bicentennial year at 3 p.m. Today on the second floor. That's this afternoon at 3. The bicentennial year kicks off with a press conference by Lieutenant Governor Reeves and Speaker Gunn. Archives will be here with memorabilia from that time period, and there will be cake and snacks. That's at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Mississippi became the 20th state in the Union on December 19th, 1817. You have on your desk a envelope from me. There are some tokens in there, a lapel pin for you with the Senate State Seal on it. There's also a challenge coin for you, and a bicentennial lapel pin with our 20-star flag on there. So I hope you enjoy those trinkets. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Senator Burton. Senator Blunt, you're recognized for an announcement.
For adjourn in memory, please, Mr.
You're recognized
President.
for that purpose.
Thank you, Mr. President. When the Senate adjourns today, on behalf of the entire Hinds County delegation, I would ask that we adjourn in the memory of our late Sheriff Malcolm McMillan, who passed away shortly, just over the Christmas holidays.
Thank you, Senator Blunt. Senator Younger, you're recognized for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tomorrow night, the Supervisor Association is having a reception at 6 p.m. at the Hilton on County Line Road, and we're all invited.
Thank you, Senator Younger. Senator Bryan, you're recognized for an announcement.
Mr. President, on behalf of Senator Younger and Senator McMahon, I ask that when the Senate adjourned today, we adjourn in memory of Barry Strevel of Amory. He was a civic leader who died suddenly, and he certainly will be missed.
Thank you, Senator Bryan. Senator Chazanal, you're recognized for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. President, for adjournment in memory.
You're recognized.
I ask today that when we adjourn in memory of Mrs. Jacqueline Tabor Lancaster, who was the widow of Billy Lancaster, who served in the House and the Senate. She was a dear friend of ours from Winona.
Thank you, Madam Senator. Senator Hobson, you're recognized for an announcement.
One adjournment in memory and two resolutions out of order, Mr. President.
You're recognized for the adjournment in memory.
When we adjourn today, I ask that we do so in memory of Mrs. Molly Boa of Vicksburg. And if I may proceed to the clerk to
bring the two resolutions forward. I'll ask the clerk to read them. Mr. Clerk, please read the titles.
Commend life of Vicksburg business and civic leader Larry Lambiati and extend the condolences of the legislature. Commend the life and honor the military, civic, and charitable service of Eugene S. Clark III of Hollandale, Mississippi.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Norwood, you're recognized for an announcement.
Adjourn in memory, Mr. President.
You're recognized.
Mr. President, when the Senate adjourned today, I'd like to adjourn in memory of Ms. Juanita Bluntson, a longtime educator here in the city of Jackson.
Thank you, Senator Norwood. We'll certainly do so. Senator Deering, you're recognized for an announcement.
Adjourn in memory.
You're recognized.
Mr. President, when the Senate adjourns today, I'd like to do so in the memory of Robert Buzzy Combs of Natchez.
Thank you, Senator Deering. Senator Blackman, you're recognized for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. President. And adjourn in memory.
You're recognized.
I'd like the Senate to adjourn in memory of my mother-in-law, Mrs. Molly Bennett Blackman, who transitioned on December 27th.
Thank you, Senator. We'll certainly do that. Senator Frazier, you're recognized for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. President. Join in memory.
You're recognized.
When the Senate joins today, I was requested we join in memory of two of my neighbors, Dr. Ollie Shirley and Dr. Leon Bell, who died recently.
Thank you, Senator Frazier. Senator Burton.
Mr. President, I think it is worth mentioning that one of your staff members will be going into rest this afternoon. Barry is going to be leaving us and having that baby after about 12 or 16-month pregnancy, it seems like. But anyway, we're very, very happy for her and wish you well. and I know everything's going to be just great, and you'll be a great parent. Also, I'd like to introduce to you Mariah Bridgeforth. Mariah's working out in the hallway, trying to take up some of the slack out there. So, Mariah, welcome aboard the State Senate. Thank you very much. Let's give both of those a round of applause.
Thank you, Senator Derek Simmons. You recognize for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. President. Adjourn in memory.
You recognize.
When the Senate adjourns today, Mr. President, I ask that the Senate adjourns in memory of Dr. Joyce Jenkins of Glen Allen, Mississippi.
Thank you, Senator Simmons. We'll certainly do that. Seeing no further announcements to come before the Senate, I will recognize Senator Polk for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate stand in recess until 5 p.m. today, at which time the record will reflect that we are adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed say no. The ayes have it. We are in recess.